Pete Buttigieg has a little bit of a problem. He continues to have a problem getting African Americans to support him. He actually scores some of the lowest on polls when it comes to support from the African American community, which is really important if you want to win the Democratic nomination and go on to win the election. Now, a lot of this is from likely his racist history in South Bend when he was mayor, much of which, of course, I and other independent media had actually talked about before. One example of that, of course, is the firing of the first African American police chief in that area, while white supremacist officers had targeted Pete's donors. So that's an interesting story. It's broken by Jonathan Larson over at TYT Investigates. And so if you haven't read it already, you probably should go there and take a look. It's a damning story where you had these white supremacist police officers on the force saying, finally, we're going to take the city back for us, meaning the white people. Okay. And they said, we're going to go after Pete's donors and they're going to do whatever we tell them to. And Pete's going to do whatever we tell him to. And that's exactly what happened. Now, so that's one of many other issues, right? Now, one way to get around that is to take ownership of your failures in South Bend, right? It would at least, yes, seem earnest. And, maybe then afterwards go and try to listen to the Black community and hear their concerns and actually try to, do something about it, right? Show that you're willing to listen and willing to do something about it. Now, the other way is this fake Black support. Now, want to guess which way Pete went? We already know. The newest example is when Buttigieg had touted support from African American comedian and actor Keegan Michael Key. So, look, I remember this, right? He's the other half of Key and Peele. I enjoy those guys. One of his most famous roles was Obama's anger translator. So it kind of bummed me out, right, to see that, that guy, Buttigieg, why would you support Pete Buttigieg of all people, right? Now, his campaign, after news of that came out, was forced to admit, oh, yeah, that whole Key thing? Yeah, get that endorsement? That wasn't an actual endorsement. Turns out, nope, he was just in favor of our, what was it? Encouraging early voting and voter registration. And that's what Key was out there, right? He was out there talking about, he was out there with Buttigieg on Saturday to get voter support, right? Now, is it kind of a pseudo endorsement? Well, let's go to Key here. He actually had said that he didn't endorse. Okay, so look, again, it's not the first time that happened, right? Now, the Buttigieg campaign, in several instances reviewed by ABC News, had identified people as supporters who later said that their interactions had been both misunderstood and misconstrued. So that's really important, right? Now, the first instance came in October. I talked about this story. The campaign issued a press release in South Carolina that identified Rehoboth Baptist pastor and state representative Ivory Thigpen and Johnny Cordero, chairman of the Democratic Black Caucus, as backers of the candidate's Douglas Plan for Black America. Now, the Douglas Plan for Black America, it's fairly detailed, a pretty decent plan. I'm not against the plan at all. But the way that they went about showing that there was support for that plan within the African American community was very problematic. So now Cordero, for example, said, hey, look, I never endorsed the Douglas Plan. Not because it's a bad plan, but people have got to understand you cannot talk for Black people. We're very capable of speaking for ourselves. Now, Thigpen is another case entirely, right? He's literally a Bernie Sanders co-chair in South Carolina. Bernie Sanders supporter, right? Now, Thigpen is like, wait a minute. Hold on here. I'm not endorsing or supporting Pete Buttigieg. And I'll get more of the details later. because it is kind of amazing. Now, another issue with the Douglas plan, right? Again, not so much with the plan, but with the supporters. They claimed that there were 400 supposedly black supporters of this plan. Turns out, upon review, 42% of those people who claimed that they support it were actually white. It's supposed to be all black supporters. Almost half of them were white. So, wow. So, again, it's not that the plan is bad. It's just the fact that he is claiming support for it, and by extension, his own candidacy, where it doesn't exist. Now, another example here. Last week, Buttigieg wrote an op-ed in a major South Carolina newspaper saying his campaign has proudly partnered with local businesses, citing Diane's Kitchen in Chester and Atlanta's restaurant in Moncks Corner. When ABC News reached out to the entrepreneurs about these new partnerships, they only remembered welcoming Buttigieg's campaign as customers, not forging any sort of partnership with the candidate. Diane Cole, owner of Diane's Kitchen, said, quote, "I stand for what I stand for, and I didn't say we had a partnership." Now, if that's not bad enough, later on, the Buttigieg campaign, after she came out and said that, right? We're not in a partnership with the Buttigieg campaign. You just came as customers, and that was fine. We welcome all customers. Buttigieg campaign says, can you change those words to make it sound more like what we wrote? One version, by the way, even had her name misspelled. That's amazing. By the way, Diane is in favor, not of Buttigieg, but she's weighing Biden or Bloomberg. So it's not as if she's a Bernie person or anything like that. But you got to be honest about where she stands, and she does not stand with Buttigieg, even though she welcomes the campaign, of course, into her establishment as customers, which is absolutely fine. So that is amazing. Amazing. Now, Cole told ABC News that she rejected the initial requests, telling the campaign, "It sounds like you're saying that I'm your business partner. I'm only going to accept that you all stopped in while you were campaigning in South Carolina, and I welcomed you all." And from the sound of it, that welcome's probably about to wear out. What a disaster. A disaster. So there's a theme that goes on in all of these. The campaign keeps saying, man, it kind of sounds like an endorsement, so we're going to take it and we're just going to run with it until you say otherwise. And then, of course, they do say otherwise because it's definitely not an endorsement. And so it's kind of embarrassing, right? I mean, in every instance, the either celebrity or the black business owner has to come out and say, actually, no, I did not endorse that person. What are you talking about? And then it makes news. But here's the thing. This is kind of on purpose, I think, right? That's my opinion on this. And the reason I come to that conclusion is because they use vague language in their press releases, right? And they put something out that people might generally agree with. They get it on the record of people agreeing with it and then interpret that as an endorsement. And then they trumpet that unendorsement endorsement or non-endorsement endorsement, right? Now, they do that probably knowing that they're going to get caught, but it's already out there. It's already out there. And I think a lot of people, a lot of news does not talk about this. You will not see this on MSNBC. I don't think you saw the original reporting on MSNBC. Buttigieg literally faking black support. You will not see this on CNN or MSNBC. I mean, it's ridiculous. Ridiculous, right? Now, back to Thigpen, right? Now, Thigpen, he adds another layer to this. He was approached by a campaign staffer to review the Douglas plan and to give his feedback. Well, Thigpen was very clear. Hey, I'm a Bernie Sanders supporter. I mean, I'll take a look at it and maybe I'll put out a statement about it because I'm interested, right? And actually, he says there's parts in it that's pretty good. For example, closing the wealth gap. That's something, of course, that Bernie Sanders is very, interested in doing, talking about the wealth gap, Elizabeth Warren as well. And so anything that's there that closes the white gap or the wealth gap between white and black people and white and black families and communities, great, wonderful. So now he says that, right? But he says, I can't endorse the plan or endorse the candidate, just to make sure it would get in the way of my support of Bernie Sanders. Now, later on, a campaign staffer decided to email him. And by the way, none of these people actually talked with Buttigieg. It was all of his campaign staffers. So I think Buttigieg is trying to just stay out of the fray, essentially, by not having any contact with any of these people. Now, the staffer wrote him requesting approval of quotes they had drafted on Thigpen's behalf. These are not quotes from Thigpen himself. This is some staffer sat down, wrote a quote out, and said, hey, can we use that? Do you endorse this? Now, the kicker is, and you're going to love this, Thigpen says, quote, they sent an email basically saying if individuals want to opt out of being listed as an endorser, then they needed to respond to the email by 4 p.m. I didn't see the email, and so of course I didn't respond to it, so they moved forward with my name. What in the Nigerian prince kind of crap is that? Really? I mean, that sounds like a scam, because it is a scam. Holy crap. That's the Pete campaign. Hey, man, look, it's not my fault you missed the email. Maybe you should have checked your junk folder. Well, I shouldn't have to, because you just drafted, it put words in my mouth, and then put me as an endorser to something that I definitely didn't endorse, because I've already endorsed a candidate. I mean, it's insane. It's insane. Now, Thigpen later on called them, right, to ask them to correct this release, as he should, of course. The campaign, he said, was contrite, quote, attributing it to a miscommunication. Hey, man, that's your fault. You didn't communicate with us, so it's a miscommunication that we accidentally put a press release for you endorsing not only our plan, but our candidate as well. Oops, you're bad. Sorry that happened. Oh my God. Jesus. So, but look, that's what they do, right? It's the pattern, it's their purpose. How low is the Buttigieg campaign going to go to try to trick people? And that's what they're doing. I think out of any campaign, they play the dirtiest. Look at Iowa. Look at Iowa. Thankfully, not a lot of people are buying it. In fact, I think nobody's buying it except for the MSNBC types who completely ignore everything and still think that Bernie Sanders has a lack of black support. Which, by the way, he has a lot of African-American support and Latino support. And so he does incredibly well with younger people of color. But you're not going to learn any of that on MSNBC, and you're certainly not going to hear about Pete Buttigieg faking support with African Americans. There's a reason for that. Hey guys, hopefully you enjoyed that free video. Now I'm going to have to ask you a favor. Between the demonetization and the YouTube algorithm messing around with view counts, etc., we're having a hard time adjusting to the new YouTube reality, which is where you guys come in. See, we have a Patreon, patreon.com/TYTNation, set up to help us rely on you guys, the viewers, instead of big corporate ads. Look, you know the show. You know how I'm not in favor of big corporations anyway. So help us transition away from relying on the ad model to pay the bills and sign up to be a patron, patreon.com/TYTNation. That goes a long way to help us keep the lights on. And you guys will know that you're supporting independent progressive media.